Welcome back to Beyond the Headline, everyone. It's a very informative day to be on the show. I'm so excited to be here with Mary Egan, the founder and CEO of Gatheredtable. Mary, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Can we start out with what you and I were just chatting about? What is a meal planner and why is it important?
A meal planner is really a software product that helps people plan meals, plan grocery lists, and make cooking easier.
And I think we all want to eat healthier, and you guys have done a lot of studies learning about this. 96% of us actually are looking to eat less processed food, more natural food. But even someone like me who loves cooking, I stand in the fridge and I look at a fridge full of food and I think, well, I don't know what to make. How are you at Gatheredtable helping me answer that question?
Yeah, so what we do is we help you figure out what you're going to cook before you go to the grocery store or before you place an online order for your groceries. So when the groceries arrive in your house, you already know what you're going to do with them, and you don't have the problem of, I have a chicken, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
And for someone who's not familiar with the way it works, what would happen if I signed up for Gatheredtable right now?
So you would sign up and you can specify your diet. So you can tell us whether you are an omnivore, you eat anything. Are you gluten-free? Are you dairy-free? Are you nut-free? Are you soy-free? Are you sugar-free? Do you not like eggplants? Are you vegan? Are you vegetarian? Are you paleo? Are you pescatarian? I could go on, but there's a lot of preferences that you can set. And then based on that, we will send you a proposed menu every week of 4 nights a week of dinners. And then you can edit that. You can add your own recipes from anywhere on the internet that you can clip in. So if there's a recipe that you like and have made before or one you want to try, you can add those. You can delete recipes, add others, drag and drop from day to day. And as you're making all those changes, your grocery list is updating real time. So usually people spend about 5 minutes editing their menu. And then they click over the grocery list, and you can either take your grocery list to the store on your phone, on the app, or you can print it out and take it to the store. It's all organized by aisle. Everything's combined together. So if you have like 10 recipes that need lemons, it doesn't tell you, 10 different lines of lemons. It's all combined into maybe you only need 3 lemons. And I even had my software programmers program in so that lemon zest and lime zest and orange zest are recognized by the software to be the outside of the citrus. So it doesn't tell you to buy another one when you need zest. You can use the outside of one you're using the inside for. And they thought this was very odd. They kept calling it lemon vest. And I was like, no, zest.
Well, I think all of those thoughtful features, there's a lot of services out there right now trying to solve the problem of helping me answer at night, what should I make for dinner? Where should I get my dinner? And it's the features that make Gatheredtable feel special to me. Personally, I have a lot of allergies. So when I first logged onto the site and you asked me about them and then actually had them, that was like an aha moment for me. As you think of those features, where does the inspiration come from?
It's a great question. I mean, the inspiration started with me, the initial feature set, and it's really been enhanced by our customers. So I had a customer email me the other day, and he said something like, I work in software, and I've spent a lot of years telling customers that the thing they requested would be on the list, but never thinking we get to it. And I love that you guys just added a bunch of stuff that people had actually asked for. So that's nice feedback to get. But that's really the source of our inspiration. We've added recently nutrition information on recipes. We added budget information on recipes. We added the capability to plan for not just dinners, but breakfasts and lunches and snacks as well. You can now plan and create a grocery list for up to a month at a time if you'd like. And these were all features that came from customer requests.
I'm glad you noted that because at the end of the year, I was looking at your year in review and was really wowed by the numbers. And to see and hear you say that everything people asked for, you've implemented, I think really says something about the brand. It's a simple question, but it has a lot of meaning. Why, Mary? Why, when they're telling you, are you delivering so quickly?
Well, to be fair, we haven't implemented everything people requested, but we did everything we implemented was requested. So just want to clarify there. We have a small team, and it's very fast. We have a really fast team, And it's funny, one of our advisors and investors and a mentor of mine is Howard Schultz, who runs Starbucks, and he was my boss at my last job. I worked for him leading strategy and corporate development at Starbucks. And one of the things he said when he came over to talk to our team in the early days at Gatheredtable was the only advantage you have from being small is being fast. So if you're not fast, then you're throwing away your only advantage. And he said, for example, he told a story about when Starbucks had like 2 stores and they were playing opera music in the stores because in Italy they played opera music in the coffee bars, and that was Howard's inspiration. And his team was saying to him, Howard, we have to get rid of the opera music. It's not working. And so they decided to get rid of the opera music, and it was, overnight they changed the music, and it was a great idea, and things got better. And he said, if we decided to change the music today in all the Starbucks stores, it would not be done overnight. And that was his analogy. So I think the team really internalized that. And there is an element of speed that is so much a part of the competitive landscape when you are a new company.
And I think it's speed and listening to your customers, just having a conversation with a friend where he was advising other founders to, don't design your product and then deliver it. Ask someone, hey, what are you looking for in this product? Because whatever you assume is highly likely to be wrong. And I know that's something that you always try to do, is assume less. What have you learned about that?
That's a good question. And we probably assumed too much early on, and we had to make a lot of changes. So we've been there too. But I think part of what we've really focused on is looking at what people use and listening to what people say, because there's also can be that gap, which people can say one thing and do another. So looking at the user data and the engagement data. And one of the things we learned, which was really surprising, is the first couple months after we came out of beta, all the customer feedback was for features that we already had. And they couldn't find them because our user interface just wasn't that intuitive. So it was this constant feeling of like people would write in and say, it'd be really great if you guys had X. And we'd be like, oh, we have it. Here's how you find it. And then the customer would write back and say, oh, I would have never found that. So we really had to overhaul our user interface. And so I think the other thing to pay attention to is not just, do you have the right feature set that people want, but is it presented and accessed in a way that is intuitive? And I think that the user design is such a rapidly evolving field that if you plan something today, it could be obsolete in 6 months. And so you really want to stay on top of that, because people come to your website in the context of other sites they've been to, other apps they've been to, and they're expecting a certain way to navigate and discover things. And it took us time to catch up to that.
Can you dive in a little bit there on the intuitiveness and maybe give some examples of how you guys have iterated at Gatheredtable?
Yeah. So as an example, it's a small one, but I think meaningful. When you're looking at your meal plan, there's a navigational bar at the top that says groceries. So in the original iteration, you edited your meal plan, and you go up to the top nav bar and click on groceries to go to your grocery list. But for whatever reason, people are writing in saying, I don't understand how to get to my grocery list. Or they would edit their menu and then they would leave and not have gone to their grocery list, which we couldn't figure out why they were doing that. Then we added a button right on the menu saying, take me to my grocery list. And all of a sudden it was fixed. And so I think it's just that thing of, it's so hard when it's your product and all the nooks and crannies and exactly how it's supposed to work. You really have to do, sit side by side with the user with fresh eyes and understand what they see and what they notice and what things mean to them. We also had words that we originally had things like, how much newness do you want in your menu? Which to us meant, how often do you want a recipe you've never seen before? And people were like, what do you mean newness? So it was just a lot of iteration on language and where things were presented.
And so how do you, in the early days and today, interact with your customers to get that feedback? You mentioned watching them use the product.
Yeah. So a couple ways. One is we get a lot of customer emails. We reply to every single one. I mean, people are shocked. They say, oh my God, I got a reply from a real person. And a lot of our customers know our team by name. I had a customer email me saying, I know Emily, I know Mariah, I know Kaiten, these are people on our team. Mariah sent me one of your dish towels. I love it. It's really a nice relationship. But the other thing is, we have some emails that go out from me, and they usually say at the bottom, just click here and reply if you have ideas or feedback or whatever. And people will email me, and I email them back, and they're surprised because I think, sometimes a big company might send that, and it kind of is a black hole email, like you reply and you never hear anything. And one of the things that I think people miss, especially in a software company, there's so much focus on the software that you can miss that human element. And we've really made it a point to have a really personal touch in customer service from day one.
And I think if you don't, it doesn't matter if you literally have the best software. If there's another product that is a little bit less functional than yours, but I can email you and give you feedback, of course I'm going to choose yours.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the other thing is, we're really trying to create a movement around healthy eating, and a movement that is already in existence in terms of people want it, and there's so much that's been written about it, and everyone knows they should do it. But we're really relying on our customers to spread the word about Gatheredtable because we are small, and the money we have we're investing in the product, not on advertising. So it really is the right thing for us to do just from a business perspective as well, to make sure that we are getting back to all of our customers and making them feel a part of what we're doing.
And on that note, Mary, something that, as I was sharing previously, stood out to me is when I got on, you weren't just asking about my allergies because that's a necessity. You have to know my allergies to know what foods I could eat. You also asked what foods I didn't like. And it's a small feature, but as a user, it meant a lot to me because it made me feel like I was cared about. What are some ways, in addition to what you've shared, that you guys foster community where I can say, I don't like eggplant. I don't think I want that recipe?
Yeah. Such a good question. One of the things we're doing is we've made it really easy to share recipes. So I know a number of women of my generation my mother did this. I have three sisters for my sisters and I have friends whose parents did it, where my mother created like a 3-ring binder and typed up all the recipes that she made frequently when we were kids and gave it to all of us when we moved out, which was very nice. But the problem is now the digital age. So one of the things that's been really nice is we have intergenerational recipe sharing and, really memory creating going on within Gatheredtable. We have people, instead of typing their recipes into a 3-ring binder for the next generation, they're putting them in Gatheredtable, and then anybody in their family can go get that recipe anytime. And that's been really cool. And I love when people say, I made this recipe, this dish, people came over, they said, where's the recipe? And I just said to them, go to Gatheredtable. I don't have to photocopy it or get out the cookbook. It's just a really nice way to exchange. And, recipes have been exchanged for, thousands of years. So it's an age-old practice happening in a really new way.
I'm glad you said that because I now know what I'm going to be doing this weekend because that is, I have a binder at home that is like my prized possession. And it's true, when friends ask me for a recipe, I have to go back and retype it for them and take out my notes that I've scribbled on there. So, for anyone listening in that same boat, we now have a solution. I think that's a great way to kind of lead into what you want Gatheredtable to be a canvas for. When I'm walking and someone brings up cooking and I mention Gatheredtable, what do you want the first thing to come to mind to be?
Oh my God, it changed my life. I mean, that's the phrase we hear from customers. Oh my God, you changed my life. People say they cook more than they used to, which means they're eating better and they're saving money. And, it's like a win-win-win. And the other thing about cooking, like anything, is the more you do it, the easier it gets. I mean, I'm not a trained chef, but I'm a pretty avid home cook. And it's amazing how much more skillful I am than I was 10 years ago. Still, I make mistakes. Not everything turns out well, but it's also joyful. Now that work for so many of us is sitting in front of a computer and really not doing something physical or necessarily creating with our hands, there's something really rewarding, I think, at the end of the day about putting together a meal. So That's what we want people to feel.
I find it to really be a stress release too.
Yeah, yeah. When people say to me, I just don't like to cook, um, part of me wants to accept that, and part of me always tries to get them to give it another try, because sometimes what they mean is, well, I tried to cook something really hard and I failed, or, I'm really busy at work and I don't have time to think about it, or, there might be something else going on. But people who cook regularly, generally find some joy in it.
I think that's a really great point, and it's a very good way for your product to really help people because that when I first started cooking, I made meringues without a mixer and it was a disaster. It was 45 minutes of me feeling like, "Oh my god, is my arm going to fall off?" How do you within your product and in your future plans for marketing make it very clear that cooking at home is of course about eating healthy, but it's also about your family and it's good for you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we try to emphasize those messages. We have some comments on our on the site and in our product about sort of why we do this, and we talk a lot about just the emotional benefits of sharing a homemade meal as well as the physical benefits. If you think about every great human memory, they always go back to a homemade meal almost every time. If you ask people, what's your favorite memories? What's your favorite memories of your childhood? What's your favorite memories of your life? There's usually a meal involved. And it's not necessarily about the food, but the food creates kind of a nurturing, really connected environment. And I love the trend in America of big kitchens and everybody gathering in the kitchen, so that it's not just the eating of the food, but it's the preparing of the food that's become a community endeavor. When I have people come to my house for dinner, I always put them to work, and they'll walk into the kitchen and I'll give them a glass of wine and they'll say, "What can I do?" And I'm like, "Here, mushrooms and knife and cutting board, go for it." And people love that. It's just a nice way to connect. So we're really trying to foster that. With the growth of digital media, there's so much disconnection, and we really are trying to just enable that face-to-face memory-making moment of, creating and sharing a homemade meal.
I love it. And I want to spend a couple of minutes, Mary, chatting about your journey. You've held numerous senior positions in the past. What did it feel like to start your own company in the beginning? Just start as a team of one with an idea.
It was scary. Part of me thought, well, I don't think I'm too good to, go to the post office, get a stamp and mail a letter or lick envelopes or whatever, mundane administrative tasks might be required. So I thought I was up to the challenge, but I think it took me a while to realize how much of a support system I had at my last jobs. I mean, I had amazing executive assistants. There was travel departments that booked my travel. I had great teams. And when you have a small team, you have to prioritize so much more ruthlessly, because you just can't do everything. But we still, who dusts the furniture in the office? Me. We still have a place where we all wear a lot of hats. And in the early days, I had these Post-it notes, and every time somebody would do something new, I would add a title above their desk. So everybody had like 10 Post-it notes, and they were funny, like, CFO, head of HR, whatever. And then somebody got the head of HR Post-it because, they filled out some form we had to fill out. I'm like, "Can you fill this out?" And then they got the head of HR job. So it was fun. But it's, the other thing I'd say is that even when the team is small, you're still laying grounds for a culture. And so I don't think it's ever too soon to start thinking about that and being deliberate about that as a leader and as a small team.
Two things I really want to touch on there. First, what you just shared. What did you take from your past experiences at Boston Consulting Group, at Starbucks, to inform the way you want to develop this culture?
It's a great question. I think, one of the things about, I'll talk about the Boston Consulting Group first, BCG. One of the things about BCG that I always really admire, and a lot of the consulting firms have this bent, which is they hire for what you can do, not necessarily what you have done. So when I went to work at BCG, I was coming out of business school, but prior to business school, I was a math teacher in a junior high school in Harlem. So I didn't really have any business experience, but they interviewed me, they decided I could do the job, and it turned out I was great at it and had a really good career there for over a decade. And so that's one of the things, I've hired some people on my team here who are great, but this wasn't necessarily what they had done before. And so it's really that lesson of trying to hire for potential and really characteristics as opposed to a knowledge set, because a knowledge set can be learned. But you can't do that with everybody. So we also have some people on the team. Obviously, software developers have to know how to code, and we needed a mix of people who had real software shipping and development and engagement experience. So it's been a blend. I think the other thing about the culture of BCG, or just the way the work gets done, is it's a huge culture that emphasizes a tolerance for ambiguity. So when you start a project at BCG, it's literally a blank piece of paper, and the client's ask could be something like, we want to be twice as big in 5 years. And then that's it.
And so you say next goal.
Right. And then you have to say how and what exactly are they going to do to get there, and how much is it going to cost, and what should they not do, and what should they stop doing. And so it's always made me a leader that assigns pretty ambiguous tasks, because I think it's a good development opportunity for people to stretch into those ambiguous tasks. And in a startup, it's required. I don't know exactly how we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but I just, that's for the team to figure out, and I think that's been a good lesson. Starbucks has an incredibly strong culture, famously strong culture like BCG. And one of the things that I took from there is there's a culture at a lot of the meetings that start with a coffee tasting. It could be a big meeting, it could be a small meeting, but almost every meeting starts with a coffee tasting. And it's partly about education and learning the product. So somebody will pour the coffee and prepare the coffee and talk about which of the coffees this is within the Starbucks realm. But it's also sort of this moment of connection, almost like a tea ceremony in Japan, where it's a ritual. And so I've really tried to put in place some rituals for our team. One involves basketball and drinking games on Friday afternoons. You can edit that part out. But we do a lot of homemade meals in the office, and we just try to be deliberate about having those moments of connection. That's not just talking about the work, but also breaking bread together.
And how often are you guys doing stuff like that?
Probably every week or two, pretty frequently. And then we have some big ones, like we have a huge Thanksgiving feast every year that is very extensive. It's kind of like our holiday.
I love it, and I have a friend who always says that, we have all of these traditions, and on the outside they may seem like they're completely unrelated to the business, but in reality they're everything.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting. There's so many, going back to my teaching days, there's so many ways in which what works for kids also works for adults. And one of the things that I know about children is they love ritual tradition. They love to know that, like, every year on Halloween we do this. Every year Labor Day weekend we do that. Every year in school, the last Friday before Thanksgiving recess we do this. And kids really hook on to those things and look forward to them. And it's a form of sort of mini celebrations and milestones. And I think adults are the same. It's really nice to incorporate those into kind of the rhythm of business.
And when it comes to rituals within that rhythm, one of the challenging things at an early stage company is there's not much of a rhythm. There are new things to do every day, and many times to your surprise, you have no idea how to do them. How do you maintain some sort of stability as you guys navigate so many new challenges, sometimes on the same day?
Yeah, it's a great question. Part of that is what's the mix of the team. So my co-founder and CTO, Eric Snyder, is really a steady Eddie. I tend to be more excitable. So we're good. If I'm like, oh my God, he's like very calm. So I think that's important. And I think as you build your team, you sort of need to know your profile. I can be much more passionate in other situations, which can be really good versus Eric, but he's much more sort of calm and steady. And so when things are going wrong, he's a great person to lean on. But I think the other thing is that you have to just accept that the role of the role of a startup is to solve problems. I have a friend who's an entrepreneur, and she says a startup is just a buffet of problems. And every morning you walk in and you sort of survey your buffet and you think, what do I feel like eating today? And really, I think the job of a startup leader is to identify the most important problems to solve and make sure they're getting solved in the fastest, most effective possible way. Because you're never going to solve every problem. You just can't. But if you focus on the right problems and you solve them well and fast, then you're doing the right thing.
I'm so glad that you said that because, getting into almost year two of working, I still sometimes will think of a million things that I could be doing. And, my dad will come in and say, no, just prioritize what you have to do today. And as I say yes to him, I'm still thinking, but no, there's 10 more things that I could do. When you sit down with that same feeling, having had the experiences that you have and the knowledge, how do you say, nope, we're leaving these till next month?
It's hard. I mean, it's really hard. And the hardest thing I think about a startup is just, you're resource constrained. So, we don't have a big enough team to say, yes, we'll do all of this today. But, I think part of it is really engaging the whole team in the challenge. So the whole team knows speed is critical and everyone's focused on getting things done as fast as we can, as well as we can, even though we're a small team. And part of what I've had to learn is patience. It's hard to wait. It's hard to have the idea of what we should do and then have it be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks till the idea is done. In big companies, it might take a year, but still 12 weeks feels like forever in a startup. And it's hard. It's hard to wait, and it's hard to not get everything done in a day that you want to. But that's, again, knowing what's important is what counts.
And when you evaluate what's important, what's guiding that decision or that framework?
It's really about what's going to make the biggest impact for the business, which is about delighting customers and growing. So how do we get more customers? How do we get more people to know about us? And how do we delight people even more than we already are? And those are the two things that drive us.
So now, Mary, could that be an example you gave earlier, take me to my grocery list?
Yeah.
That's a very small addition. Let's say you're in between this and you're in between a potential website redesign. Would you choose the take me to my groceries because that would have the most impact?
It's a good question. I think the answer is it depends. We've done a couple of pretty major redesigns. And in most cases, we took the things like take me to our grocery list and we incorporated them into a big redesign. But sometimes, we'll just do something because it's relatively quick and easy to add and it can make a big difference. And sometimes we'll just do those, in a day. And we might decide, execute it, and release it in the same day. And I can't remember taking our grocery list if that was one of those where it was incorporated into another bigger release. We definitely take both tacks. But there's also the flip side of a startup, which is because you can do things fast, you have to fight the temptation to take action on every single little thing. We got into a mode for a while where it was like every time a customer wrote in, we were like, oh, that's a great idea, we should change it. And it was like, no, we have a plan, let's stick to the plan. These things already on our plan are what we should be doing, and unless it's something broken, let's not fix it because we know these things we've already planned to do are really important.
How do you come up with the plan?
Well, some of the things have been on the plan for a long time. It was just when we could get to them. Some of the things are ideas from customers that we also think are important. Everybody on the team is very active, ideating about new features and things we could add to the product. In fact, we have one of the guys on our development team who doesn't even cook. He literally doesn't own a spatula, but he's one of the most prolific idea generators about what we should add.
So I think he needs it.
Which always makes everybody laugh, but actually sometimes he has a great idea because he is intimate with the product, even if he isn't an avid home cook.
And for you personally, do you have a time just for yourself where you sit back and you think about goals?
I do. I travel a lot, and so that's one of the things that I do on airplanes. Is I try to reflect, and I'm pretty deliberate about writing goals for each month. I give a monthly update to my investors, so when I write it, I sort of say, here's what happened last month, and here's my goals for this coming month. I put them down, and then I update on the end of the month on those. So that's been a great discipline for me, and it's nice to be able to look back over those going on, 20 months now.
And so you said, let's say you set the goals January 1st. How often are you checking in on them until February?
I don't need to check in on them. Like I know, they're not, it's not 50. It's not goals like tactical, it's goals like, we're going to spend more on doing X. We're going to, for example, we had a release a couple weeks ago, and one of the goals for January was to really debrief and do a hindsight on that release and what went well and what didn't go well, so that we could make sure that going forward we have those new learnings really formally incorporated into how we're doing releases. So that was just a goal, and it's already done, but it's the first week of January, but it was, it doesn't take long. So we did it. And then we have other goals, like we are trying some different customer acquisition paths in January. And I already know it's happening, that the team is working on them, and we're kind of in email contact all the time, and we'll see at the end of the month how it's going. They're less goals that there's a risk that we won't do them, and more goals that is just about prioritizing what are we going to focus our time and energy on month by month, and how are we going to keep doing better what we do.
And you mentioned the debrief process also. So from your last release, when you guys are sitting down together, how do you debrief at Gatheredtable?
Yeah, it's pretty informal. We have a couch area, and we all kind of sit on the cozy chairs and the couches, and we'll just talk and sort of say, what worked, what didn't work. One of the things that's really great about our team is there's no, as somebody said, I love working here because there's no dead wood. But it's a small team, and every single person is really respected by every other single person. So we don't have any sort of defensiveness or anything like that when we're debriefing. It's really an honest conversation about, what went well, what we could have done differently. And then we have, people like me who don't have a software background. I'll ask, somewhat naive questions like, why don't we do this at 10 p.m. or whatever? And then we'll talk about why and the pros and cons of different options. So it's an educational process for me every time, but it's something that I think everybody feels good about, because it's easy to just move on to the next thing and not take that time to pause and say, how did that last thing go and what did we learn from it? And we really try to do that, because otherwise you're just constantly running.
In your experiences too, what have you learned about giving direct feedback?
It's interesting. I think that people are sometimes hesitant to give direct feedback because they're worried that it's going to hurt someone's feelings, or, it can be uncomfortable if you're not used to it. And, that's another thing where I think BCG was a great place to start my career, because feedback is just part of the norm in consulting. And actually I had a client once who called it the gift of feedback. And at the time we laughed, because they used to say the gift of feedback all the time. It was sort of part of their culture, and we used to giggle about it. But I actually think it's really a good phrase, because it is a gift. And imagine being in a company or a group within a company where you don't get feedback. You're wondering. You have no idea how you stand. You go into your annual review, and it's like a black hole. Anything could happen.
Surprise.
And the reality is, this is the teacher in me, but, people don't learn once a year at the annual review. They learn every day, and people really learn by doing. So if you grab somebody during an activity or directly after an activity, and you give them feedback on either what went well or what you think they could improve next time, that's when they're going to be able to incorporate it and actually act on it. Not, at the annual review when you're trying to remember back to what happened in April.
I think that's so important, and it's certainly a skill that we all learn simply because we have to. Like you said, you can't just operate in a black hole. It doesn't do anyone any good. With all of your experiences and lessons and mistakes that you've had to learn from, do you have a single point of truth when it comes to leadership and management?
I think honesty and truth is really important, and transparency. I think people, especially in a startup, people want to know how the company's doing. Everybody's taking a risk. Everybody's gotten on this boat together. One of the analogies I use is kind of like being a European setting out in a boat for, the new world. In the old days, you got these people in your boat, and you think there's land over there, but you're not sure. And you all set out, and you have some, basic navigational instruments, and you're looking at the stars. And I think it's very important to have everybody know what's going on and feel a part of it, and not just like a cog in the wheel. And I think that's true at a big company as well, but especially at a small company.
As
So.
you mentioned a big company too, and that Howard is one of your mentors, what are some core lessons you've learned, whether it's from a formal mentor or an informal mentor, watching them operate and lead?
Hmm. It's such a good question. Um, I think I learned a lot about EQ from watching Howard lead and watching other mentors and leaders lead. There's it's so much about how you make people feel and the environment versus specifically what you're saying. You can say the same thing and deliver it in 10 different ways. And so I think there's a real skill around just engagement and connecting with people. And, Howard has capacity to do that in a room of 10,000 Starbucks partners, which is what they call employees, and really connect to all of them. He's a great speaker that way. But I think that ability to connect almost one-to-one as a leader with everyone that you work with is really important. And I think that, at the end of the day, we have such an opportunity as people who are educated and live in the United States to choose our job. We can do what we want. And people want to choose a job where they feel connected, where they like the mission, they feel like what they're doing is important to making the world a better place, and where they feel connected to the leadership and the people around them.
I think that connection is so important, and it's often what you hear when you say, why do you work here?
Yeah.
Even if it's not an idea, just as you were saying, you have a team member who doesn't cook. So on the outside, you would never think about joining a company that is committed to helping people cook.
Yeah.
As you look back on your time thus far at Gatheredtable, what stands out as a team memory that you just love?
Well, here's one that I really like, which is our original user design was a design that I had created, and I'm not a web designer, and it was really charming. It had like little hand-drawn chalkboards and little chalk icons, and it was super, super cute. And it wasn't very intuitive or easy to use. And there was sort of a growing feeling among the team that we had to change it. And, one day we were having a meeting and somebody said something, and I said, how many people feel that we need to change the design? And everybody looked kind of sheepishly around. They had clearly discussed this among themselves and nobody wanted to tell me. And basically they all looked at me and said, all of us. And I was like, okay, we're changing it. And then we played taps. And we took a screenshot of the old design and put it up on the wall with RIP next to it. And we had kind of a little ceremony to say goodbye to the old design. And it was really cute.
Well, I think that's something that's really important, and it goes back to that honesty and truth. One piece of advice that you like to give entrepreneurs is don't complicate things. Don't create an environment where you can't come in and give the CEO feedback. It's not helping anyone.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And the reality is, in a big company, you can't know everything as a CEO, and you need to rely on people to be honest with you and tell you what's happening. And same is true in a small company. It's easy to get attached to something if it was your idea.
How do you create an environment where ideas and results are just data, not this like personal part of you?
Well, I think part of it is acknowledging when you yourself make mistakes. And then I think it creates an environment where it's safe to make a mistake. So, when I make a mistake, I'm pretty loud about it. We joke about one of the things we tried last year that was by far our worst customer acquisition tactic was my idea. So it's like on the chart as the worst, and I put my name next to it.
You got to own it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, the reality is, I always say to my team, it's not bad to make a mistake. It's bad to continue a mistake. So we need to recognize it and call it as early as possible and stop doing it. So I
When you
think
do it that way, it's almost like a celebration of like, hey, we found it. We're not going to do it anymore.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, before we go, Mary, we always focus on just three questions that don't have to do anything with work. So, of course, my first question has to be, what's your favorite gathered table recipe?
Such a hard one. I think my favorite is probably the shrimp fried rice because it's one of those recipes that when people make it the first time, they have an experience of, and I had this experience first time I tried it. This is something I thought I could only get in a restaurant, and I actually made it at home, and it tastes as good as like great fried rice in a restaurant. And it's super easy, and it's a good like you have leftover rice, make this recipe. So.
I love it. Question number two, whether it was personal or professional, what's the best feedback you've ever received, and why was it important that you heard it?
It was professional, and it was my first job. I was 21, and I got feedback from my boss that I was interrupting people in meetings, and I was totally unaware of it, and I really loved what I did. I worked at a public policy think tank on education, and I was really passionate and excited, and I would be thinking really fast and just blurt things out, and it was one of those shocking moments where you realize that you are lacking self-awareness, so you can't see yourself on the outside, but it was really helpful. And now I have a daughter who has the same problem, and I'm trying to correct it earlier so she doesn't have to have her boss tell her at her first job.
That's a win-win for both of you. So, and you'll save her much earlier. Last one. If we had a time machine right now, it was going to pull up outside of your office, and you could go back in time to any period of time, whether it was your lifetime or before, where would you want to go back to?
Oh my gosh, I wouldn't move because the best time and place in the history of the world to be a woman is in America right now.
That is a good one. I like it. And no one ever gives me like this present time right now. So I think that's a perfect way to end. And for everyone listening, what's the best way, Mary, for everyone to stay up to date with you and stay up to date with Gatheredtable?
Well, you can follow Gatheredtable on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Probably Pinterest is our biggest follower group, but we have a growing group on Instagram and Facebook as well. And please sign up. It's free for the first 10 days to check out the meal plan and grocery list, and it's free forever if you just want it as a place to collect recipes from across the internet, save recipes, organize your recipes, share recipes with friends and family. That will always be free. So please check it out, and happy cooking.
Perfect. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us today.
Thank you. It was great. Thanks for the opportunity.